Oh, it is such a joy to be here with all of you and to be in this newly refurbished, incredible Ben Franklin room. We are the first people seeing it, and I am so excited to see how this will continue creating opportunities for people to come together, to work together in such a beautiful setting. Let me start by thanking Secretary Blinken. I am incredibly grateful to you for your leadership, the tremendous job you're doing on behalf of President Biden's foreign policy, the successes that you and your colleagues have obtained. It's truly remarkable. I think if we had been in this room in its former, much gloomier kind of look a couple years ago and talked about an invasion of Ukraine that instead of driving a stake between us and our allies, brought us closer together in order to support the right of the Ukrainian people to defend their liberty and freedom and democracy. People might have doubted that because we had burned so many bridges with our allies and our friends. So reinstating a foreign policy that plays to the best of American values, that puts our interests and security front and center, but does it in a way that actually brings people to us, not pushes them away, would have been thought to be extremely difficult. And indeed, it was, but it was accomplished. And that, plus so much else you've done around the world in your time, helping to restore America's standing, keeping us safe, strong, and respected, is truly remarkable. Thank you, Secretary Blinken. I also want to acknowledge Secretary John Kerry, who I see over there, my successor, and thank you, John, for your indefatigable leadership on behalf of climate and everything you're doing to try to help us outrun the rise in temperature and all that comes with it. I know I and many other Americans are very grateful. And I want to acknowledge Evan Ryan. It is absolutely true that really the reason I, as First Lady, got to meet this young, very eager foreign policy staff member is because he was always in our office. Now, some people, as Milan Verveer, my wonderful friend and chief of staff in the second term of the Clinton administration, will remember some people were there because they had business they wanted to talk to us about. Some people were there because Milan had a giant drawer of candy, which was a way of enticing people to come and talk about business. But you were there for another purpose. And I could not be prouder to have Evan here. She's working at the White House once again. Her service is extraordinary as well. And I love the fact that they met during the Clinton administration. So thank you. I'm also delighted that 42nd, as I call him around the house, is here. It always gets his attention. You know, sometimes saying Bill, he's watching, basketball or football or something, but if I say, oh, how do I hum Hail to the Chief? But thank you so much for being here as well. I want to thank Steve Polson for the portrait, which you'll see in just a few minutes. He has extraordinary talent that has been called on by other secretaries of state whose portraits you will see around the building. Now, this is an incredibly emotional moment, looking out and seeing so many of you with whom I was privileged to serve over my 4 years. Some of the challenges and the adventures and opportunities that we pursued together through the State Department and USAID. And I want to thank all of the current and former Foreign Service officers and civil servants here today, because although much of their daily work goes unsung on the front pages of newspapers or barely mentioned on cable news, it is vital to our nation's security. And so I want to give a round of applause to those who are the heart of our diplomacy and development. When I came into this building now 14 years ago, hard to believe, I knew there was something very special about this place, and that having the singular honor of leading the State Department and USAID would be an incredible, both personal and professional experience. I had no idea the level of talent and expertise that resides here in the building and across all of our embassies, consuls, and other outposts throughout the world. People who serve this country with 100% of their commitment, their intelligence, who bring every experience to bear on whatever the challenges might be. I am so grateful that I got to spend those 4 years crisscrossing the globe with many of you, endless miles traveled, oceans crossed in pursuit of peace, prosperity, and security. I do think that it was important to restore America's commitment to diplomacy and development. That's why from the very beginning I started talking about the 3 Ds, those plus defense, because we needed to make it clear coming out of 2 wars that had been extremely expensive in blood and treasure, that we had also a strong case to make around the world to draw people toward us to pursue common interests and values. And I think, as the Secretary just said, we tried to do that by dealing with individual crises, of course, but also taking a longer-term view about where we wanted to be, what kind of world we wanted to create for our children and our grandchildren. So we built global coalitions to curb nuclear proliferation, to tackle climate change, to promote democracy. We continued to build on our human rights commitments, women's rights, gay rights, the rights of all people to have a chance to live up to their own God-given potential. And we have seen the continuation of a lot of the values and priorities that we worked on into the Biden administration. And in looking across the globe, defending democracy in Ukraine, expanding NATO, just as an aside, too bad, Vladimir. You brought it on yourself, and that was such a point of contention. And we always said, people are not forced to join NATO. People choose and want to join NATO. And so, indeed, expanding NATO, facing down Russian aggression, managing the challenges from China using creative diplomacy in the Indo-Pacific, from the Quad to AUKUS to the historic Camp David meeting between the Japanese and South Korean leaders, and strengthening our alliances and partnerships. Now, of those 3 Ds, we know defense gets the most attention, gets the most money, but the people in this room understand very well the enduring power of diplomacy and development, not only to keep us safe, but to promote our interests around the globe. I am privileged right now to be teaching at Columbia University at the School of International Policy and Affairs, and co-teaching with the dean, who is an expert in international relations, particularly the theories that help explain why leaders make the decisions that they do. Our course is called Inside the Situation Room, and of course I use a lot of examples from American diplomacy and development in order to convey to students in this very large class what's possible besides aggression or responding to aggression. Now, everyone here is part of the tradition of diplomacy, which is as old as our country, as Ben Franklin is watching over us. I continue to call what we should be doing smart power, because it's better than the opposite. And I remember very well how the increase in applications to the Foreign Service started going up once President Obama took office. People want to serve our country. They even are willing to put themselves in harm's way without wearing a full military uniform and carrying an assault rifle. They want to be part of building a better world that the United States can help to shape. So there are no finer public servants than those who I was privileged to live with. You know, when I think about the myriad of challenges our country and the world face, and people have this phrase, you know, polycrises, which sadly is kind of descriptive. What makes me sleep a little better at night is knowing that there are people in our government getting up every day trying to make the right decisions, sometimes when that's not so obvious, sometimes when it carries consequences and costs that can be difficult to explain away, but which are part of charting the course we need to take us forward. So thank you, Secretary Blinken, for your work, continuing the tradition that Secretaries of State certainly aim to fulfill, of being a good steward during the time that you're here of our country's values, interests, and security. And it is such a joy to be back here. And I haven't seen this portrait in a really long time. Steve Paulson is amazing, but between COVID, between not wanting to finish it during the prior administration, it's been a while. It's been a while, and I am going to be probably as surprised as all of you, but this could not be a happier occasion, and thank you so much for hosting us. I guess you get to get out of the way, right? It was COVID. We couldn't get in the State Department. So what's the perennial symbol that we all stand for, right?